I should have known something was off before I even saw her. The drive out to the lake had been peaceful, scenic even. Golden light flickered through the trees, and the air was cooler than usual for September. It should have felt relaxing. But somewhere between downtown and the restaurant, that familiar pressure started to build behind my temples. A kind of sixth sense. Not panic, just a dull warning hum in the background, the kind you ignore until you wish you hadn't. I pulled into the parking lot, took a minute to center myself before heading inside. It was my birthday. I wanted to be present, to enjoy it. Emma had spent weeks planning the evening. A terrace dinner overlooking Lake Austin, friends, wine, the works. She'd mentioned it with a kind of polished enthusiasm, like a project pitch more than a surprise. But she was always like that, efficient, sharp, unflinching. The hostess greeted me with a warm smile and led me through the glass doors onto the terrace. That's when I saw her, Emma, standing near the center table, laughing with someone from her lab. She looked like she belonged in a movie scene. Natural light behind her. Hair just undone enough. Smile curated but not forced. But then the details started to emerge. First, her neck. I caught it just as she turned toward the lake, tilting her head to respond to someone. A faint beige smear right at the collarbone. Makeup, clearly, but not quite blended. More importantly, not quite her shade. It wasn't the tone she wore, and it had transferred clearly from something or someone else. Then there was her left wrist. I'd known that wrist better than my own. Years of wearing the same slim gold watch I bought her our second anniversary had left a dark impression on her skin. But tonight, that familiar shadow had been disrupted, replaced by a fresher band, thinner and higher up. A newer watch had been worn today, just long enough to mark her. Now it was gone. She caught my eye across the terrace and smiled. Not startled, not surprised. That smile, it was already ready. "Ben," she said, gliding over. "You made it." She kissed me lightly on the cheek, her hand resting briefly on my chest. Her perfume, no, not her perfume, hit me instantly. It wasn't floral or powdery, the kind she usually wore. It was deeper, sharper, a masculine scent. Cedar, sandalwood, maybe something synthetic, the kind of cologne that clung to fabric long after its wearer had left the room. It was on her cardigan. "You look amazing," I said, because what else was I supposed to say? "Thank you," she replied, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. "Everyone's just settling in. Drinks are on the way. You want wine?" "Sure." She was already signaling the waiter, efficient like always. The table stretched under a canopy of string lights, candles flickering in glass holders. There were 8 of us total, old friends, co-workers, 2 of Emma's grad students, and Owen. Owen, her boss. Mid-40s, always half a button too relaxed, half a compliment too familiar. I'd met him a few times before, professional settings mostly. Tonight he looked at ease. Expensive blazer, half-drunk Negroni in hand, leaning just a bit too close to Emma every time she spoke. My wine arrived. Emma's glass too. She didn't touch hers. We settled in. People made small talk, catching up about lab gossip, research grants, AI policy changes. I mostly listened. Emma was magnetic, commanding the rhythm of the table without dominating it. She laughed at all the right cues, redirected conversation whenever it veered too close to awkward. She was in control. Then something subtle. Owen reached for his glass and took a sip, setting it down just off to the right. I noticed the mark on the rim immediately. Lipstick. Not smudged. Perfect. A single, clean curve of dark rose. Emma's signature shade. I glanced back at her. Her lips were bare now, the color mostly gone, probably faded in the last hour. But her glass? Still untouched. She noticed me looking. For the briefest moment, our eyes met, and then she smiled again. That exact same smile from when I arrived. "Oh, wait," she said suddenly, reaching across the table with a small laugh. "Ben, I think this one's yours." She switched our glasses casually, like it didn't matter. "Mine's drier." Everyone chuckled, distracted by a birthday toast someone proposed right after. Glasses lifted. Someone mentioned the cake arriving soon. But I didn't drink. The rest of the night played like a scene she'd practiced. People came and went from our corner of the terrace. Someone lit sparklers. The waitstaff brought out a miniature cake with edible flowers. Emma took my hand as everyone sang. She looked at me like I was everything, and for a split second I almost believed her. But the cologne never faded. It lingered on her like static. Later, after the cake, Owen stood beside her, hand grazing her back as he complimented her project management skills. I watched how she leaned slightly away but not too far. Just enough to avoid suspicion, not enough to sever the familiarity. I pretended to check my phone. What I really did was note the time. 8:46 p.m. We'd arrived around 7:10. That was more than an hour of maintained performance. I wondered how long she'd rehearsed it. I wondered where she'd come from right before. I noticed a napkin in her lap, blotted with foundation, like she'd wiped something off. Her blazer stayed on all night, even as the temperature rose. She never once left the table. She never once checked her phone. Too perfect. By the time dessert was cleared and people started saying their goodbyes, I'd stopped trying to ignore the inconsistencies. Instead, I started collecting them. Lipstick on Owen's glass, the swapped wine, the smell of another man on her, the band on her wrist, the transferred makeup, the missing watch, the subtle way she steered the room, kept the attention off her, directed it instead to cake and candles and curated joy. When we got home, she kicked off her shoes at the door and slipped into the bathroom, claiming she needed to rinse off the smoke from the terrace candles. I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door. I waited. The shower turned on. The door stayed locked. That night, I lay next to her in bed and stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying it all frame by frame, gesture by gesture. Her body facing Owen during dinner. Her shoulder brushing his when they posed for the group photo. The way she never really looked surprised at anything. It wasn't just her calm that stood out. It was the precision. There's a particular kind of silence that follows suspicion. Not the kind where nothing is said, but the kind where everything sounds different. The way keys drop on the counter. The cadence of a laugh. The time it takes for someone to reply to, "Where were you?" After the dinner on the terrace, that silence settled in. It didn't happen all at once. That would have been too obvious, too kind, even. No, it was slower than that. A string of tiny shifts that each, on their own, might have meant nothing. But strung together, they buzzed like a live wire. The next morning, Emma changed the password on her laptop. No warning. No explanation. I only noticed because I'd gone to pull up a recipe we'd bookmarked months ago. A simple risotto thing we always joked about never making. Now I couldn't even get past the login screen. "New work policy," she said without looking up. "IT wants everything tightened, right?" Later that week, she disabled the shared calendar we'd been using for years. Just disappeared, our color-coded life, gone overnight. No more green blocks for Emma, dentist, or Ben picks up dry cleaning. Nothing. "I'm just streamlining," she said. "Too many notifications." Streamlining. That was her word now. It replaced honesty. Then there was her phone. It started living face down on the kitchen counter. Always. She used to toss it around like it didn't matter, half the time forgetting where she left it. Now it followed her everywhere, bathroom, laundry room, even the shower. And I mean literally into the shower. I caught it once, the faint glow of the screen through frosted glass while she stood under the water. Spotify, she claimed. Sure. But the showers, they were different too. Longer. Always in the evenings, right after work. Sometimes within 5 minutes of walking through the door. I'd barely say hello before she'd vanish down the hallway. Blouse unbuttoned. Sandals kicked off like she couldn't get clean fast enough. "Office was hot," she said once, toweling her hair. Except it hadn't been hot that day. Not by Austin standards. The thing was, I wanted to be wrong. Every part of me screamed to let it go, to stop noticing, to just trust her. But trust doesn't grow back once you've watched someone practice being believable. It wasn't just the timing that started to unravel, it was the geography. Her "I'm working late" texts became routine. Always some emergency grant proposal or board call that couldn't wait. But when I checked the location tracker on our phones, something we'd both enabled years ago during a road trip, hers froze in the same spot every time. A quiet stretch of warehouses just outside the city. Not her office. Not even close. When I asked about it casually, "You guys still at the lab? Looks like you're off I-35 again." She barely blinked. "Oh yeah," she said. "Owen rented a temporary space out there for overflow work. Easier to focus." The lie landed smoothly. Too smoothly. But then I started noticing the car. We share one car, or we used to. Emma began using rideshares more often, claiming it was easier than hunting for parking downtown. I didn't question it until I saw the odometer. The numbers didn't match her stories. If she was just going to the office and back, we were somehow racking up twice the miles. At first I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'd misremembered, but I started logging them. Quietly, day by day. They didn't lie. Then came the scent. Not the cedarwood cologne from the birthday night. That was gone after a few days. No, this was different. Richer. Heavier. Still masculine, but warmer somehow. I noticed it first on one of her cardigans, hanging off the edge of the bed. I leaned in, just a habitual thing I'd done 100 times, and paused. It wasn't hers. It didn't smell like the lab. It didn't smell like anything I could explain. After that, I started checking. Every time she draped something over a chair, or tossed it into the hamper, I paid attention. And it was always there. On cardigans, jackets, scarves. Like someone else was leaving their signature on her before she ever came home. One night, I pulled her white blouse from the hamper and found a faint line of beige along the inside collar. Just like on her birthday. Same shade. Same smudge. Like something had been quickly wiped away but not fully scrubbed. "Do you smell this?" I asked her once, holding up a hoodie that reeked of something woody and foreign. She sniffed, shrugged. "Probably the Uber driver. Those guys drown in cologne." I didn't press, but my stomach turned. Then came the locks. Our house uses a smart lock, one of those Bluetooth models that logs entries by time and code. Emma and I both had profiles. I'd never paid attention to the logs before, but after the third night in a row where she came home later than she'd claimed, I checked. Entries started showing up well past midnight, some even closer to 2 a.m. When I asked her about it, she said she'd left her phone in the car and come back out for it. Once or twice, fine. But 6 times in 2 weeks? I screenshotted every one. The final straw, though, the one that stopped being just theory, came on a quiet Thursday. Emma had fallen asleep early on the couch, and I used the opportunity to sync her email app, something I hadn't done in years. The inbox was clean. Too clean. But I found a receipt. It wasn't emailed to her. It was in her digital wallet, tied to a name I hadn't seen in a while, her maiden name. A rent transaction. Monthly. To a property management company I didn't recognize, Westside Lofts Holdings. I Googled it. An apartment complex above a row of repurposed workshops on the west side of town. Industrial, upscale, discreet. The same district where her phone kept freezing. She didn't rent anything under her real name. Not under our shared records. But under her maiden name, her independent identity, as she liked to call it. She was paying rent. Monthly. Quietly. Separate from us. I stared at the transaction for a long time. The amount. The date. The recurrence. This wasn't a crash pad for work. This was lived in. Maintained. Maintained in secret. That night, I watched her sleep beside me. Peaceful. Breath steady. Like everything was fine. And in a way, maybe it was. For her, the math had already been done. The calendar wiped. The alibis rehearsed. The smells dismissed. The inconsistencies filed away under paranoia. But for me, something had shifted. It was no longer about whether or not she was lying. Now it was about how far she'd already gone. And how carefully she'd planned to not get caught. There's a difference between suspicion and certainty. Suspicion lives in the gut. Heavy, shapeless, and always whispering maybe. Certainty, though, has edges. Cuts clean. It leaves you bleeding, but it leaves no doubt. For weeks, I'd been circling the same conclusion without touching it. The strange sense, the passwords, the hidden wallet. All smoke, no flame. But I couldn't live with smoke anymore. I needed to see the fire. I knew one of my old college friends, Ray, still worked in private security. We hadn't talked much in years. One of those friendships that survives through the occasional holiday text. But when I called him that morning, my voice tight and clipped, he didn't hesitate. "What do you need?" he asked. "Footage," I said. "From a camera near the co-working district, the one off West Side Drive." He didn't ask why. Maybe he didn't have to. "Give me a week," he said. "If she's there, I'll find her." That week felt like a slow suffocation. I went through the motions of normal life. Work, errands, polite conversations, but everything blurred into static. Emma, meanwhile, acted like nothing had changed. She smiled over morning coffee. She hummed while cooking. She texted on my way every evening around 7. And like clockwork, her phone would stop moving right around the industrial district before jumping back to our house around midnight. Each night, the scent of cedar or musk followed her home. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. By Thursday, I'd stopped pretending we were okay. I was sleeping in the guest room by then, the distance easier than lying beside her. She didn't ask why. Maybe she already knew I'd seen through the act. Friday morning, Ray called. "Got something," he said. "You sure you want to see it?" I didn't answer right away. My throat felt dry. "Send it." It came through an hour later. A shared drive link labeled simply WSD footage, entry cam 12B. The file was only a few minutes long. I opened it on my laptop, alone in my office, blinds drawn, door locked. The frame showed the side alley beside the co-working building. Grainy, low light, timestamp in the corner. 8:54 p.m. The date was 3 days prior. A Tuesday she'd claimed to be working late on the board proposal. At 8:57, the door opened. Emma stepped out first. Even through the pixelation, I recognized her posture. Shoulders pulled back, chin tilted slightly up. She wasn't hurried. She wasn't sneaking. She was comfortable. Behind her came Owen. He didn't look like a boss in that moment. He looked like a man who already knew how this would end. They talked for a moment under the dim security light. She laughed. Even the muted footage seemed to carry it. Then she adjusted her coat, and he stepped closer, straightening the lapel for her. It was such a small gesture, but so practiced. Not the clumsy familiarity of co-workers. Something rehearsed. He brushed her hair back. She looked up at him, and then she kissed him. Slowly, deliberately, no hesitation, no surprise. Like a scene she'd memorized line by line. His hand slid briefly along her neck, resting under her jaw, and then she kissed him again, deeper this time. 20 seconds, maybe more. When they finally parted, she smiled. That same calm, measured smile from the terrace. At 9:14, they disappeared down a narrow passageway leading behind the building. The camera caught only the brief blur of movement, shadows folding together. They didn't reappear until 9:37. Her hair was different, slightly tousled. She smoothed it with both hands before walking toward the parking lot. Owen followed a few steps behind, adjusting his shirt cuffs. They didn't touch again. She turned left. He turned right. The timestamp froze at 9 hours 38 minutes and 22 seconds. The video ended. I replayed it 3 times, each slower than the last, until the silence in my office became unbearable. The sound of my own breathing felt too loud. I sat there, staring at the frozen frame, her face caught mid-turn, lips curved faintly, eyes lowered. I'd seen that expression before. The night of my birthday, when she swapped the glasses. Rehearsed, predictable, perfect. I closed the laptop. For a long time, I just sat in the dark. Later that evening, when she came home, I studied her like a stranger. The faintest reddish tint lingered near her collarbone, half hidden under foundation. Her blouse smelled faintly of citrus mixed with something heavier, that same masculine undertone. And when she leaned over to kiss me goodnight, I saw it. A trace of lipstick, barely visible, like it had been wiped off carelessly. The same shade as the one on Owen's glass that night by the lake. That was the first night I didn't speak to her at all. The next morning, I woke before dawn and sat on the edge of the bed, watching her sleep. The light from the window cut across her face in slanted stripes. Peaceful. Innocent. If I hadn't known, I might have believed it. But now that I did, everything about her felt curated. Like even her sleep had choreography. Her phone was on the nightstand, face down, as always. For once, I picked it up. Locked, of course. But when I tilted it slightly, I saw the faint reflection of my own face in the dark screen. Tired, older, hollowed by something that had no name yet. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger would have been easier. What I felt instead was erosion, slow, steady, irreversible. By afternoon, I'd already made a copy of the footage and stored it in 3 different drives. Not out of revenge. Out of instinct. Evidence was safety. Facts didn't twist themselves into apologies. I spent the rest of the day in silence, letting the reality settle. Every denial she'd ever given me replayed in my mind, each now framed by that video. Her voice saying, "It's just work," while her hands reached for another man's collar. That night, she came home humming, bags of takeout in her hands, pretending like we were still us. She set the food down, smiled faintly, and asked, "Rough day?" I just nodded. In a way, she wasn't wrong. It had been the roughest of them all. But when she turned away to unpack dinner, I saw the small, invisible truth that no one else ever would. The way her body moved with certainty, like a person who'd already made peace with their choices. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't losing her anymore. I already had. Once you've seen the truth, the lies start to glow in the dark. That's the best way I can describe it. After the footage, I stopped searching for reasons and started looking for structure. Because Emma's betrayal, it wasn't random. It didn't feel messy or impulsive. It felt clean, measured, like she'd designed it with the same precision she brought to her work. So I followed the pattern. And patterns, when you trace them long enough, lead you to systems. It started with her old laptop. She hadn't used it in months, at least not in front of me. It sat on a shelf in the guest room closet, tucked beneath a stack of outdated research journals. But one night, after she'd fallen asleep with her phone clutched under her pillow, I retrieved it. The boot up was slow, familiar. The password hadn't changed. What I found wasn't shocking, not at first. Just folders, neatly named, color-coded, boring on the surface. But the deeper I went, the stranger it got. One folder, labeled budget_backups, held nothing related to finances. Instead, it contained scanned PDFs of ride receipts, all from the same rideshare service Emma used, dated every Wednesday and Friday night for the past 3 months. The pickup location varied, but the destination didn't. Westside Lofts, Unit 6D, that same address from the rent payment under her maiden name. The timestamps were consistent too: 7:42 p.m. pickup, 11:52 p.m. drop-off, give or take a few minutes. No round trips, always outbound and inbound like clockwork. I opened another folder labeled Miscellaneous Admin. Inside, tiny image files, each one cropped tight, a corner of a loft-style ceiling, a portion of a rug, a coffee mug on a wooden counter, bare feet on polished concrete. Private, close, comfortable. I clicked through them slowly, trying not to breathe. One of the photos showed a reflection, caught faintly in a mirror's edge. Emma holding her phone, half her face visible. Wearing the cardigan I'd noticed earlier that week. The one that smelled like someone else. I kept scrolling. Another subfolder, proposal drafts, looked empty at first glance, until I opened one of the Word files and realized it wasn't a proposal. It was a script, literal alibi scripts, dialogues, lines she'd written out, timing included. 7:38 p.m. I'm heading into the final meeting now. Might be late. 9:26 p.m. Still at the lab. Will text before I head out. 11:55 p.m. Exhausted. Just got home. You still awake? Scripts. For me. Each line carefully phrased to match her rides, her absences, her lies. The tone was casual but exact. And the timestamps matched everything in her message history. This wasn't carelessness. This was choreography. I found a spreadsheet next, a full tracker. Columns for dates, arrival and departure times, outfits worn, types of foundation used, cologne masking options, and even weather conditions for explaining why she might come home wearing a jacket or hair damp. It read like a film production log. Wardrobe, continuity, cover stories. She had it down to a science. Another file, Westside 6D listed inventory. Candles, unscented. 2 toothbrushes. One labeled, "Oh." Minimal wardrobe, stored in locked cabinet. Steamer, travel size. Makeup remover and replacement kit. Extra phone charger. Spare shoes. Portable Wi-Fi device. Emergency gift bag. At the bottom, a note. Do not leave foundation on pillow again. I leaned back in my chair, blinking at the screen. This wasn't an affair. This was an operation. And Emma had been running it like a shadow project. One I was never supposed to see. I checked the shared cloud next. She hadn't used it for anything personal in a long time, but one of her auto-sync settings had failed to turn off. There, I found cached app data for the digital wallet under her maiden name. Recurring payments to Westside Lofts Holdings. Same day every month. Marked as consulting overhead. She'd even masked it on the bank statements. Had it routed through a dummy LLC. Something called Eidolon Group Services. When I Googled it, nothing came up. Just a landing page with a broken contact form. She'd layered it well. Not invisible, just disguised enough for someone who trusted her not to question. And I had trusted her. That was the part that stung the most. I wasn't just cheated on. I was a blind participant in a system someone I loved had built. One lie at a time. I started building a mirror of her system. I mirrored the ride receipts. I copied the schedules. I mapped out every Wednesday and Friday for 3 months and matched it to her text logs, rideshare activity, location data, and smart lock entries. Perfect match. 7:40 p.m. Rideshare. 8 p.m. Text. Still stuck at work. 11:50 p.m. Smart lock opens. 11:55 p.m. Finally home. Showering. Missed you. Week after week. Even the trace cleaning routine had structure. She'd always showered the moment she got home on those nights. She'd immediately wash her hair, swap outfits, and throw her outer layers into the washer on a quick cycle. I chalked it up to habit. But now I saw it for what it was, trace erasure. She never wore the same thing twice in a week. Her makeup kit rotated in discrete cycles. She alternated cardigans to avoid residual scent overlap. Everything was precise, rehearsed. Even her physical contact with me was calculated, just enough to maintain the illusion. I thought about our last few months, about how easily I'd swallowed the distance, how I told myself we were just tired, busy, that the way she pulled away from kisses or ended phone calls early was stress. No, it was preservation. The system depended on clean boundaries. I checked her location data again. She turned off most tracking, but every now and then she forgot. A few breadcrumbs had remained, enough to confirm at least 8 additional visits to the loft. Scattered across weekdays, she claimed to be working late or traveling to conferences. She wasn't in Boston last month. She was 20 minutes away. And that weekend she spent at the retreat with the board? Her phone had pinged once, briefly, from a cell tower directly behind the co-working space. She wasn't just slipping away. She was living 2 lives. And I'd never seen it. I sat there, staring at the timeline I'd built, hands shaking slightly, not from rage but from a strange clarity. There was no more guessing. No more maybe. It was all laid out in front of me. Data, receipts, documents, timelines. A betrayal not just of trust but of shared reality. And yet, in a twisted way, I respected the scale of it. Not morally, but intellectually. The elegance of the deception. The completeness. She hadn't just hidden an affair. She'd built a life behind mine, with rules and rituals, contingencies and redundancies. The question wasn't why did she cheat? The question was, how long had she planned to get away with it, and whether she thought I'd ever be smart enough to find out. Up until that point, I told myself this was personal, intimate, a slow unraveling of a marriage. But systems like Emma's don't happen in isolation. They don't run that cleanly without support. And the deeper I dug, the more I realized. The affair wasn't the whole secret. It was just the entry point. What caught my attention first was a presentation buried in one of her offline backups. A keynote file labeled HL_options_draft_V7. It looked like any of her old pitch decks. Sleek design, professional tone, clean transitions. But when I opened it, I knew immediately it had nothing to do with her foundation's public work. Title slide, Harborline LLC. Operational framework, Phase 2 expansion. No logos, no disclaimers, just those words. Slide 2, primary objectives. Establish no surveillance zones in high-density metro areas. Deploy NDA-secured discretion spaces for client use. Eliminate digital traceability during dynamic silence windows. Enable layered alibi frameworks using smart behavior scripts. I just stared at it for a moment. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. This wasn't about hiding an affair. This was infrastructure. A full-scale support network for high-function deception. Hidden meeting spots. Fabricated timelines. Location and communication jamming. It was the kind of system someone like Emma would dream up, if ethics weren't a barrier. I kept scrolling. Slide 4. Key partnerships. Preliminary. Eidolon Group Services. Corexis Proxy Merchant Systems. Westside Lofts Holdings. Pilot Property. Alloy ND. Legal insulation provider. Westside Lofts. The place she'd been using. Not a coincidence. Pilot Property. Not just a hideaway, a proving ground. I flipped to the final slide. It was a calendar view, redacted labels, black bars over names. But one entry hadn't been blacked out yet. Week of September 12th to 18th. Confirm timing with O. Switch glasses at dinner. Pre-write narrative timeline. Final transfer of utilities. Schedule letter Ben post-launch. I felt something in my chest compress. That was my birthday week. The switch glasses. I remembered it clearly. The moment she swapped our wine glasses at the terrace dinner. Laughing like it was some cute mistake. The lipstick. Owen's glass. Her own untouched. The way she pivoted the conversation to the cake before anyone could notice. And now I knew that wasn't instinct. It was on a list. A literal checklist of steps. She hadn't been scrambling to hide something in the moment. She'd planned it in advance. Practiced the timing. Probably even tested it with Owen. But worse than that, far worse, was the last item. Schedule letter, Ben post-launch. I opened a search bar and typed, letter. Found it in a folder labeled post, recovery, personal. A Word doc, 3 short paragraphs. Ben, by the time you read this, I'll have already moved out. I need to start this next chapter alone. Please know this was never about you. It was about what I couldn't ignore in myself any longer. You gave me everything I asked for, and I couldn't keep pretending that was enough. I hope one day you'll understand. Emma, it wasn't a goodbye. It was a statement of clean exit. And it was dated September 20th. For days after my birthday, she had timed her departure to follow the launch of whatever Harborline was. So I started tracing the money. Emma had always been one of those overachievers who landed grants people twice her age couldn't touch. Her nonprofit, a research-focused education foundation, had exploded in its second year. I'd been so proud of her for it. But now, with new eyes, I followed the routing chains from her operating budget. 3 shell contractors. Each had names just bland enough to escape scrutiny: consulting firms, analytic support, vendor coordination. But all 3 linked back to the same billing address. Eidolon Group Services. The one that routed the rent for her loft. So she wasn't just using Harborline's system. She was helping fund it. Grant money meant for outreach and community programs was quietly being rerouted through research contracts to finance NDA-enforced safe zones. Places people like her and Owen could vanish for a few hours a week, leave no trace, and re-enter the world clean. She'd built a double life and paid for it with donated funds. I started to imagine how deep it went. How many other clients were using Westside Lofts? How many others had access to the Harborline scripts, the jam zones, the alibi writers? Was Emma just one of many? Or was she helping build a marketplace for betrayal? The more I uncovered, the less personal it felt. And that was the strangest part. At first, I thought I'd feel anger, betrayal, disgust. But instead, what I felt was awe, like staring at a machine you didn't know existed, and realizing it had been humming behind your life the entire time. By midnight, I had created an entire digital mirror of what I'd found. Duplicates on drives, encrypted archives, password-protected folders hidden inside old tax returns, camouflaged among PDF receipts and mortgage forms. She'd built hers in silence. So I would too. I combed through the smart lock logs again. Late-night entries, consistent with the Harborline meeting times. The calendar, wiped. But a backup of her mobile sync history revealed entries marked with strange acronyms. HLO, DSW, NCZ. Meetings with O every Wednesday and Friday evening. Scheduled precisely for 7:40 p.m. One block was labeled Dynamic Silence. No details, no location, just 3 hours grayed out. I found a template buried in one of her private folders, labeled Client Template DSW Final. It was a fill-in-the-blank guide. Insert name. Insert primary narrative. Family obligation. Emergency call. Urgent meeting. Suggested window. 3 hours 30 minutes. Deploy script at launch and end. If suspected. Divert using controlled vulnerability narrative. See appendix. This was real. There were clients. There were methods. There were appendices. It wasn't just cheating. It was a network. Emma had looked me in the eye so many nights, touched my hand, asked about my day, all while maintaining a system that existed to defeat my understanding of time, place, intimacy, and memory. The last thing I found that night was a list. I don't know if she ever intended it to be read. It was handwritten, scanned into a private image folder, labeled Only Personal Exit, Draft A. Confirm Owen Re, post-launch. Move utilities, Wi-Fi, water, storage to personal. Update lawyer on Q4 filings, in case Ben retaliates. Switch gym membership, billing address. Final backup of foundation docs. Prepare message for board. Schedule letter. Tell Ben to be mature on birthday, remain calm. Host terrace dinner. Clean the scene. I read it over and over again. Clean the scene. I remembered the candles, the lake, the cake she'd picked out, the way she kept the conversation light, how she never once lost her composure. It had all been written down, all planned, even me. I mirrored everything, her drives, her scripts, the Harborline files. I built a timeline down to the minute, backed up video, logs, receipts. Quietly froze joint accounts, reallocated assets. Met with lawyers. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. I was building truth in layers, undeniable, admissible, airtight. While she rehearsed her exit, I was documenting every step. She thought she was moving in silence, but I'd already built the record that would speak for me. A year later, her next birthday, she told me to behave. I did. I arrived calm alongside Owen's wife. Mid-toast, I handed Emma a tablet. On screen, footage, schedules, transactions, Harborline's buried files. Conversations froze. Faces drained. Emma lost her job. Owen was dismissed. I moved out that night, leaving behind only the truth, verifiable, complete, irreversible. No yelling. No warning. Just the story ending exactly the way she wrote it.